everyone. We'll get started to get started on time. I'd like to start by thanking you for all turning up and welcoming you to my session. I'll just quickly do some introductions to who I am and the session. Firstly, the session today we're going to cover communication, online communication specifically, and how to communicate in forms that students will actually be receptive to. I've called this obviously engaging digital natives. I myself consider myself one of the digital natives. I grew up on the internet and have been communicating in these ways since I was very young. So I thought it was best that I give a talk specifically on the types of communication that we use in that space and the types of communication that you as teachers can actually use to engage students in different ways online. And also they've asked me to make this a bit more unconference-like in my presentation. So I do ask that everyone engage, and I'll ask people input at various times. But if you have any anecdotes or anything that you think would add to the session, please feel free to add them in. Anything that you're doing in the classroom or anything that you think's working that would add to the discussion, that would be great. So just a bit, firstly, introductions. My name's James Leckie. I'm the technical director at a company called Alaris. We develop a piece of software called Schoolbox that is used as a learning management system. So we specifically work in the education space, developing tools that enable teachers to actually communicate online and share resources and information online. I've also got my partner here, Sean Richards, with me. He's also a partner in the company, and we're both working in this space, and we've got an exhibitor stand down there at the conference centre as well. So just to get started, I wanted to talk a bit about what we've got in terms of the usage of the system. Now, these are some stats that we found on the Australian Bureau of Statistics page that I thought were really interesting. Firstly, obviously the amount of children that are accessing online, we're quite high on the laptop devices, but we can see here that mobile phones and other devices are also quickly growing and catching up. Also interesting is the age distribution there, that it's almost even across all the ages, so all the way down to 5 and 8-year-olds. We've got them using mobile devices and all sorts of laptops and portables to access the internet as well. So there is quite a big representation of all students accessing the system, and obviously it grows over time as they increase. One of the things that I found really interesting in these statistics when looking through them was that over 90% of students in this survey said that they used the internet for education. And I thought that was a great statistic, that we actually are effectively using already internet in the education market, and over 90% of students are using the internet for that purpose in their online time. So I guess, what are they actually doing online and what are they using? So quickly just talking about some of the tools that they are using in the internet. Obviously there's a few up here. Facebook, we're using that for photo sharing and invites and catching up with friends. Twitter, with its short form communication, all of those sort of things. Pinterest, one we've just recently added into Schoolbox, is a great tool for visual communication with boards and pictures. And Snapchat. Snapchat's interesting because students use it for an instant messaging system because it has an element of privacy to it. So that's something else I'll talk about a bit later, about the elements of privacy. I think that one thing that I found looking at all these different tools, that imagery was really critical to all of these. That something that there was in amongst all of these was, I guess, that idea of imagery, and communicating with imagery was really important amongst all the tools that students actually use as the tools that they're currently communicating with online. Does anyone have any other ideas of tools that they use for communicating online? Which one was that? Instagram, yeah, definitely. Tumblr, yeah. They're all other those tools like that. And that actually brings me to my sort of next slide, which is obviously what are they producing online. So students aren't just communicating online, they're actually producing content and they're making things online. So up here we've got all of those things like Instagram, Tumblr, Blogger, WordPress, YouTube. Making videos is obviously becoming a big thing as well. We see lots of students creating videos inside and outside of the classroom. The other one over there in the corner, DeviantArt, I always like to point that out to people. You may not have heard it, but it's an amazing site. It's a community art gallery. And it's where students can create their own and curate their own gallery of their artwork. And it's a place where you can actually submit and vote and rate and buy each other's art. Deviant art. Yep. It Yep. Yep. It is interesting because it's actually the 79th largest site on the internet, and it's run by just 4 or 5 guys, and it's an amazing site. It's got lots of great artwork and imagery and obviously written as well. So it's a really great site to check out if you've got the time. The other thing I noticed about the DeviantArt site was that in its demographics and its breakup of its user group, it actually had 20% of its users were under 18. So I thought that was a massive percentage were actually students using that system as well. So be aware of that. So I guess one of the things that we really want to harness is that students do enjoy expressing themselves creatively online. They do enjoy using these tools. So we want to make sure that we're actually using these tools as ways to submit work and actually engage their actual creativity when creating work and submissions. So I'm going to quickly go over why I guess we use these different services and what they're using them for. So quickly, bite-sized content. So all of these services look at using really small snippets of content. They, for example, Twitter, it's just 140 characters or 250 characters or whatever it is at the moment. It's all short form. So all of these tools allow very short, quick communication. And the idea of that is it's relevant, it's short form, it's easy to consume, and it's up to date at that moment. So thinking about that in the classroom, there's lots of ways we can actually use that in a classroom context to communicate with students on a small bite-sized way. Don't overload them with content, I guess I'm saying. Don't have huge worksheets with mammoth amounts of information. It's much more that idea of bite-size, dribble feed the content when it's required. The other thing about all these services is they're accessible on a range of devices. And I see everyone here today has got a whole range of different devices. Sean's on his mobile phone over here, and some people on their iPads, and some people on laptops. And making sure that you're using all these different services and that are online, all of these services are accessible on all devices, and that's really key to the uptake of them and the usage of them, because you don't want to exclude someone because they don't have the right device. You don't want to make them, not part of the activity because they don't have a device. So using something that can be just used on a mobile phone or on an iPad or on any device that the student has can be really useful. Can I get just an indication of what devices people are using currently in their classrooms? Is it all iPads, laptops, combinations? Is any schools outlawing mobile phones still? One school? Yeah. Yep. Yep. Yeah. Yep. Yeah, so there's a good range of devices being used, so it's good to hear that everyone's using the different devices. So in most schools that you're coming from, do they have one-to-one programs, or is it a bit of a mixed bag? Yep. Okay. Yep. 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 So yeah, there's a range of different things. Obviously, there's a bit of a trend at the moment to move towards that idea of BYOD. Obviously, because once again, all these services are available on all these different devices, so you don't need to limit the device that you have. You don't need a standard set tool because you can get these softwares on anything that you actually have in your hand. Yeah. Yeah, so it's a rolled out laptop program, so every student gets a set laptop program across the whole, or iPad, or... Yeah. So rather than having a range of devices available, you sort of prescribe it. And traditionally, when we had like software that you had to install on the computers, and you had to have your textbooks installed and all of those different systems, one-to-one was the way everyone went, because it meant you could control that software set. But as you move into these online tools that I'm talking about today, it doesn't become so relevant. You can just say, yeah, use your mobile phone for this activity because I know that, or this student can use their iPad because it's going to be available on all the devices. So looking at another thing about all these systems is that they're very connected. So not only are they connected in terms of they're connected on the internet, so you can access them on a range of different devices, but they're also connected in terms of social aspects. So harnessing that idea of that social feedback is really important in online, I guess, learning. That idea that you can have peer review, you can have other students look at your work, and you can share those ideas not just in the classroom, but also amongst the entire world. So that idea of that connected community outside of the classroom is really important, and you can obviously use that to great benefit in the classroom as well. So, I guess just a quick overcap of what I know about the digital learners of today. They do enjoy sharing knowledge, so there is no sort of gateway, I guess, to what they're thinking about. They're happy to put that out, happy to put it out there online. They're not worried about that privacy aspect so much when it comes to that material. They're happy to share it and have feedback from all over the world. So there doesn't need to be that idea that it needs to be contained. It can be open and exposed, and there's benefits to that as well, because they can obviously share their views and opinions with a greater audience than just in the classroom. Obviously, they're always connected, so they're always got that idea of being connected to the internet. So they're not afraid of that idea of having something and finding it online, all of those sort of things. So they're always connected, and they're always connected whether they're in the classroom or outside the classroom. So your students can continue to access resources, learn, and do activities regardless of whether they're in the classroom or outside. So thinking about ways to harness that. So flipping the classroom is a classic one, where you put videos up for students to watch outside the classroom. Because they're always connected, they're always going to be able to do those activities. Another thing that's really important is this idea of transparency. Now, the internet has become the ultimate in transparency agent. It's made everything that everyone does visible. And that breeds this idea of trust. And when you're talking about that online learning experience, being transparent and being able to effectively communicate what students need to do, when they need to do it, is really important, so that they build that trust, that they know they can go somewhere, find the activities, do them, understand them. Obviously, of course, finally students are 24/7. They are always online, and they are learning 24/7. They're not just learning in the classroom, they're learning all the time outside in a range of different spaces. In our system Schoolbox, we actually find the peak time is between 8 o'clock and 12 o'clock at night. That's actually the heaviest time of use for our system. So students are going home after dinner, logging in, and doing a lot of the work that they do online in our system at those hours. So that blows the whole traditional concept of in the classroom. There's a lot of learning that's being done outside the classroom at times that suits the students. And I think we're going to see that as a trend as well, that classrooms are going to become more flexible. We'll probably see over time that you don't have so much classroom time, you have much more flexible operating times. The students can access these tools online anytime when they need it. Does anyone have any ideas on what they think about students and their learning online, or anything that I've missed here that they could add to this?
I sometimes worry we might have a group of students who are struggling with English, and of course they don't get their work done because they spend so much online but do anything but work. I mean, they're really just talking and chatting. They're not doing anything. You are but oh, no time for that. And that's the way they try to always get so that's what we do. So like reasonable stuff.
Interestingly enough, I heard an answer on that the other day, that we're now in a generation that spends more time communicating with the written word than it's ever done in the past. We now have a generation that's probably going to be better with communicators with the written word than we've ever had ever before, because all of them are spending so much time online communicating, chatting, writing text. It's a boon to English skills for all of that written work to be done. Does anyone agree with that? I can't spell. They use abbreviations?
They don't actually write in proper English. They write in native speakers or teenagers. They don't write a proper sentence. They're not reading properly. Commercially, English scholars say that the language has always changed.
English is an evolving thing. So. Yeah. Yeah.
You need to sustain this, but after the long text, I mean, so you don't just want to think about it. That's not very long of things. They've got to have a bit more depth of thought. They've got to be able to express themselves in more detail. We don't just want to one answer.
Yep, definitely.
Yeah, I agree with what you're saying. I think maybe we need to look at the longer things which require more, higher cognitive functioning than reading, a couple of statements. Maybe we need to bring that in the format that is a chunk more appealing and with imagery, so that they'll still get through that more sophisticated language.
And
that's just immediate.
Yep.
Letting them take ownership too. My year 11 history class was created a Facebook page that my privacy settings are too wide, so I can't get on it. But they're constantly saying, no, Ron, did you see that thing that I posted? And they're taken, and they're actually out there constantly seeking information and sharing it with each other, like you're saying up there, without me even being a part of it.
And that's really important to engage. I'll talk a bit about that as well, because that can empower them to learn without the teacher, which is great for a teacher because you can actually extend them. Yep. Yeah. Another thing that interesting in English, when I was in year 12, back about 12 years ago now, I did one of my submitted work written pieces was actually an email, and it was an email. It was just at the verge of the internet becoming a thing. My English teacher probably had never even written an email or seen an email, and I wrote it in internet slang. So I used all the abbreviations. I used all of those horrible sentence structures, and I submitted this. But I also submitted it with a reflection piece, discussing the evolution of the language and how that language has changed. So that was in proper English, so that the English teacher had that concept of what I was trying to convey, that idea of this is my world, this is my language, and this is how it relates to the English that you're teaching in the classroom. So that was an interesting way for me to actually bridge the divide between the two languages.
And I'll actually get the boys to send me an email that's inappropriate, like that they could send to, and they'll send me their hilarious emails with all their abbreviations, and then they'll send me a proper email when they actually want to speak to me as a teacher.
Yep.
So I guess we do that without thinking that we allow them to be themselves, but then we show them that there's also another way. I mean,
yep.
Yeah. And then hysterical the emails that I get.
We sometimes have email threads that work with just meme after meme after
Yeah, just images. Communicating with just images. So I guess I'll move on to a bit about how you can actually use these sort of examples. Firstly, one point of view is that the idea of providing bite-sized pieces of information I mentioned before. Some practical examples of those, obviously communicating with very short form descriptions of the task that you need to do. So rather than having a big work booklet that you hand out at the start of the year, providing small broken down tasks so that students can step through them and they get the accomplishment of ticking off items as they go through the list. So that idea of that short form, bite-sized chunks, not overloading them with a whole lot of material, giving them smaller pieces that they consume at the time that it's relevant for that particular activity. Be aware of that though. There is some downfalls that students who want to move ahead or go back, often it's difficult for them in that case, but it is good for students to keep up to task with you giving them bit by bit, step by step instruction. The idea of taking a snapshot of the board and putting that up on the page, on the Facebook page, that's the perfect example of that idea of just providing a bite-sized piece of information Easy thing to do. You just go and take a photo at the end of class, post it onto the page, and there's a bite-sized piece of information that they can reference at any time that they need to go back to those notes. And some other ideas. I guess from some other concepts you can create, obviously, a lot of different ways of communicating. Blogs are a great way to engage. Blogs are great because they can have comments, so you can actually have students giving feedback and having discussions underneath them, and Facebook pages as well. All of those types of tools are great for sort of engaging online discussion, and they can happen inside and outside the classroom. So you have a blog, you write maybe what the task is or an introduction about the topic, and then students can then comment and give feedback in that area directly under that on context on topic. Obviously video is always a hot topic, so flipping the classroom's the buzzword for that, but just using video in general. There's a wealth of information out there already in videos. YouTube, they've got Khan Academy is an amazing resource if anyone's used that. There's so many videos out there that you can already reference. You don't even have to be making your own videos. You're just referencing existing videos that are on topic and providing them as part of that learning material. And moving into that sort of digital space. So students can watch those videos and get background information and extra material as they need it. Neo K12's another video curation site, specifically for K-12 content. So it has videos just for K-12 learning. There's a few of them around that sort of do curated. YouTube has one as well called YouTube EDU, I think. That's like a curated area just for the videos in the education context. The other thing that I think is really good is infographics. So using infographic systems, you'll find heaps of these all over the place. They're really good at communicating ideas, especially in geography. You'll find lots of infographics for that particular area, but science, geography, lots of ways to communicate quickly and bite-sized information. Does anyone have any other ideas for ways to sort of communicate those sort of bits and pieces of information or tools that you use for communicating those things? Yeah. And how do you use Edmodo just for that sort of stream of... Yep. Yep. So yeah, in fact in Schoolbox we've got both of those tools embedded into them. So we have our own version of Edmodo, which we call Social Stream. It allows you to have this threaded discussion in your classroom context. Obviously, it's set up all for the classroom automatically. So that's one of the tools we thought was a great idea in our system, and we built it in. The other one we've got is Padlet as well. We've got that idea of a collaborative document. You can create a collaborative document, and all the students can log into it at once and write in that document at once. Is that Padlet? It's almost identical. I'll talk to you about it later. Socrates? And do you use that on the different devices as well? Yeah. Yep. So you... Yep, the results coming in. And do you put the results up on the board so they can, so they can reflect on those results? Yeah. Oh, that's a great idea as well. Scavenger hunts. That's a classic one. Does anyone use that concept as well? Yeah. Yeah, QR codes. Yep. Yep. Obviously, I mentioned before, we talked about Socrates and all of those sort of tools. Obviously, engaging students to use their own devices, so making sure that the activities use their devices is really important. So, you know, the QR codes is a classic one. Scavenger hunts, Socrates doing quizzes and things like that on their devices, all great ways to use their technology. Obviously, once the classic one, just using devices for research. It blows me away that how much power is often in the computer, and it's not used for that purpose, for just researching and finding resources. And things like Edmodo is a great example where we've had great success with our social stream, is that students have actually gone off and done all this research on a topic, and they're just posting it into the classroom feed. They're posting links as they find them, and other students are commenting on those links. And so they're doing all the research and sharing that research with other students so that they can build their understanding from the research that other students are doing. I think that it's really important to broaden the range of assessment submissions, and this one's a bit controversial because I always get asked, what about VCE and what about HSC? And I know that they're problems, and I know that there's not much I can do about them as well, but I think it really is important, in the lower years particularly, is to broaden that range of acceptable submissions. Think outside the box with what you're going to accept. Don't just limit it to just a written paper. Don't prescribe the what's got to be submitted. It's what you're looking for is assessing their understanding, not their ability to create a piece of paper with written word on it. You can accept video, you can accept imagery, you can accept a whole broad range of different systems. You could accept a Facebook page or a blog. We had a teacher talking about creating Facebook pages in fictional characters the other day. So they were creating fictional historical figures and collaboratively building those pages as that person. So they had comments about things in their time, place, and it was just another example of a different way that they could accept an online submission. So does anyone else have any other good ideas on broadening submissions?
Do we have a problem that there's a lot of policy, like we're not allowed on Facebook pages for
Mm-hmm.
so then we have that. So we come up with these great ideas that we can't actually implement in our classroom.
Yep. Do you ever challenge those ideas? I certainly challenge them.
We do all the time.
Yep.
But I'm hoping with our BYOD that they'll be they're not going to be able to really complete them, but then I think they are going to, because I think that all the students are going to have to log into the server.
Yep. There's obviously a big debate there with the duty of care versus the freedom and the responsibility, and I think that there's a personal learning experience there for students to be taught responsible use of the internet. Rather than just locking them down. They're just going to go around that anyway. They're going to go home and do what they want anyway. It's not going to be that big a impasse to them. But obviously from a school's perspective, they're looking at the duty of care aspect. But I think the duty of care should be applied through a learning experience rather than through a firewall or a block.
There are so many programs we can use.
Yeah, definitely.
We use on the language teachers, so we teach German. We use sometimes their oral charts that explain everything on their iPad or something like that. But then
Yep.
they can put pictures with it if they want that. But I might actually be mainly their speaking.
Yep.
And then give them on speaking.
Yep. Has anyone else heard of Explain Everything?
Yep.
Yeah, everyone's heard of that.
That's mine by Twitter.
Yep.
One is called Tweet, and with the number of tweets throughout the term, and the one criteria, so it's all our content throughout the term.
Is one accepting video as
Yep.
what sort of platforms are you using to accept those videos?
We have Sol, which is our move site, and it's 100 meg, and I can say like they have to make sure that it's less than that in order to upload it, but otherwise there's some schools who don't do that and you can fix that later. But they will accept it on the USB or through Google Docs and stuff as well. So we make it so that it's easy for them to get it if they don't follow the instructions.
Has anyone experimented with accepting it via YouTube or something like that so that it's public as well? Yep.
And we've just got the YouTube thing that we set up in last week.
Yep. Yep. Excellent.
We use Uptune. I don't know if Uptune really cool animate videos, and Moodle is another one. We want some animations that we upload to YouTube. What's that called? Powtune, POWTOON. It's a free education license, and then there's also Moodle, MOOBLY. Powtune.
So that's Well, it sort of leads me to my next point, which is you can obviously lock it down so that it's private. But one of the things that I think why I was leading with that question about YouTube was I was interested to know if people have actually worked with this information being accessible to the world and what that means to the student and the type of information they're communicating and that idea of peer review and also discussion around those submissions. So using a tool like YouTube, you can obviously have it open and students can go along and peer review each other's submissions and review them and give them feedback. So that's a really useful thing as well. So rather than thinking immediately about locking it down, thinking about how you can open up some of these submissions. The
negative comments. I'm not saying lock it down to the other part, but from outside, there's pretty nasty all the people out there.
There is.
You've got kids who, very sensitive.
Well, it scares me as well. Obviously, in our system, we sort of do try and keep it fairly protected. We're sort of very nervous about peer review in general because of the issues with negative feedback and the issues it can cause. We're looking at it, but we're going to probably anonymize our peer review. So it'll be show anonymous students' work and get anonymous feedback so that there's no personal issues involved in it. That's the sort of way we're looking at it. But has anyone done that with wider tools out there? Is there?
Didn't know how to build this machine in Minecraft, so I went onto YouTube and found a tutorial for it, and that showed me how to. But then I went onto the online community to ask for help, and he got help from that. And then he gets peer reviewed with that. And I asked, and there were 96, 3, 4 students. So I go, what are the rules for posting stuff? Every single one of them, not one, did not know that you always post something positive. You post good things to help them improve. You don't use bad language. And if you say anything nasty, you can immediately report that and they will get taken off. So they already know responsible digital citizenship. I think that will change once they become teenagers. But they know. But I mean, the other thing is again, that whole release of control from the teacher. That I've got arguments for bringing your own devices. Kids are going to get onto social websites anyway. Regardless. And so the teacher's role then is how to then focus those tools and using for educational purposes.
Yep.
And building that whole thing of what happens if we get into that.
Yep.
So we start looking at how to deal with it.
Yeah, and that idea of digital citizenship is so important to it's a learning experience in itself, teaching students what they can expect to experience, how to deal with that experience online, how to make good on the internet. All of those things should be part of that education experience. We shouldn't be afraid of engaging in that space just because we haven't sort of thought about what we're going to teach them about it. Yeah. Lots of our schools have now got a course specifically citizenship. Yep. Yep. I can think of one off the top of my head. Melbourne Girls has got a very good one off the top of my head. They've got a course that goes through multiple years with different stages and different lessons learnt. So it goes all the way from the early years up into the senior years, where they learn a whole lot of everything from responsible use of the device all the way up to sexting and privacy issues as well. Yes. Yep. Yep.
So the question on Christian teachers using video submission. Our school got really cheesed off just a photo several years ago of themselves in school uniform. And the whole idea of the school image and then having it on YouTube available to anyone is a real issue for administrators. So that's why we're doing comments on that. I know you're saying open it up. I know school administrators say, hey, I'm not sure that we should do that.
My general point of view, and this is consistent across a whole range of different aspects of the duty of care issues and things like that, is none of this is actually a new issue. A lot of the policies that already exist already will cover any space, regardless of whether it's in the classroom, whether it's in the playground, whether it's outside the school, or whether it's online. The same policies about correct wearing of the uniform, the respecting the image of the school. All of those things still exist. It's just about reinforcing and educating students about that policy and then disciplining that policy as well to make sure that it's enforced. Obviously, there's the issue of how do you monitor the entire internet for these types of things. And I think that's the teacher's responsibility to be actively involved in the student's online life, and then you can actually be a guide, be an actual teacher in that space, and help them learn about what is good and what is bad.
actually friendly teachers from being friends with their students online. So policing that becomes a real issue.
And
yeah, we're not allowed to be their Facebook friends, but I think if you set up a school thing, that's completely different. But it's still the same as having an email. You've got your kids who've got their Facebook or the Instagram or the whatever site they show people, and then they've got their other one.
Yep, so there's obviously still a lot of issues for administrators who think of it as a new space, but in my mind I don't think of it as particularly a new space. It's just the same rules, the same things apply that have always applied. You just need to make sure, just as you have a person standing out the front of the school making sure that everyone leaves the school has the correct uniform on, you need someone who stands at the internet and checks that they've all got they're all behaving correctly under the school name online. And if there is problems, you give them that Friday detention, just like you did when they didn't wear their uniform.
Yeah, I get that. School send something online and now anyway.
Yep.
I think it's far more out there. Like when I went to school, they didn't have a phone.
What's the worst that you're expecting?
There's some pretty bad things. I know the boys at my school have been pretty something.
Yeah, so they're out.
Yeah. And
but the thing is, it's now out there. People will see it, stuff you can't get back. People have really done something with it, then it's still out there. And I think that's the big issue rather than, so in the past, like it was contained, whereas now it's so much harder to contain it, and that's what people get off. Not the fact that they know what you're going to do. Those things they're always trying to do. The fact that it's all out there, and it's more to that it harms them without them thinking about it as well. That is to come back to life in the art.
Sure, but that's the students. I'm talking about the schools.
Yeah, but no, that's the thing. That's what the school is worried about. That's what the school is worried about. It's about their reputation.
I'm not necessarily say, well, boundary, you're wrong. I'm not necessarily affecting the school. I just know.
there has.
Parents ring up because they see our boys in their school uniform, and our boys are really good. But they will ring up. General public schools are very obvious where what they're doing.
Yeah, there was obviously some issues not last year, that year before. A big major school in Melbourne had media with boys bullying some kids and posting the video on YouTube. That went viral and then went into the papers. There are big issues like that I think terrifies a lot of schools.
This is kind of moving away from using these in the classroom.
Yeah.
There's a couple of ways to do this. Like, one is the way that we address this is we actually centralize all of this content into our system so that the teacher can see all this different embedded media from all these other different sources, YouTube, or even allowing students to upload photos and videos straight into Schoolbox. So it's all centralized in one view. So rather than having to friend or subscribe to someone's YouTube channel, they're like embedding that video or uploading that video or submitting those photos instead of people on Instagram. Or like James said, adding Pinterest and then putting the Pinterest wall into Schoolbox. So it's centralizing it all in that one system.
So it's like an extranet, so that only people that have access to it.
It's just a range of different tools
Yeah.
you can use.
But it's an authenticated environment, so only only your school can actually access that content and that material, and it becomes that curated space. And that brings me to my next topic, which is creating those forums, those spaces that are your moderated spaces. So rather than having it all out there in spread out all over the internet, and running into these risks where you don't know what's happening out there, bringing it into a contained environment where you have control over that space, you can moderate, you can be a teacher in that space is really important with that online learning as well. So making it happen on your terms, in your place, is really important to that idea. The other thing that I think that's really important is that idea of encouraging students to actually ask questions of each other. Certainly from my own experience, I learn best when I'm teaching someone else the content. That's when I actually learn the topic, that understanding. So I think that idea of actually encouraging students to help each other, provide feedback to each other, ask questions and respond. There's a great example of a site called Stack Overflow, and this is a programming example. I think there's a more generic version of it now, but Stack Overflow is, I think it's one of the biggest sites on the web, certainly up there in the top 50 or something. And the way it works is that you get points for every question you answer correctly, and you get voted on. And this idea of being given credit for helping other people is a really powerful one. Has anyone used any tools like that in the classroom?
Verso's really good.
So what was it?
Verso.
Verso?
Fantastic. They're really good.
Yep.
You can post anything from a YouTube clip to documents. And what I normally do is I create a Google Doc for the kids to edit. They get a link to that in the Verso app, and it's also web-based. Go out to it, read it, edit it, come back in, and then write questions and answer feedback to each other.
Yep.
And they've got a free educational license.
Do they have voting and things like that as well? So you vote.
Voting, no, but they can all respond to each other.
Yeah.
And all in on it.
Yep.
Fantastic. You've got a really good relationship.
Yeah, I really like that idea of the upvoting of responses. It gives that peer feedback and peer review as well built into the Stack Overflow. It's actually more programming focused. It's just something we use internally, but there is actually versions of it. It's been redeployed for different purposes as well. And I was just wondering if anyone actually used anything like that in the past. Yep.
I haven't quite gone to upload things. Certainly I upload things and then they all have to comment
Sure.
on that and they get badges for
Yep.
each of them on their comments, of a high level or not.
I've already talked about peer review, I guess. Already covered that quite a bit, so I'm going to skip over that one. I've only got 15 minutes left as well. Has anyone actually got students to share their work, and have you discussed any of the risks associated with the idea of sharing work before submissions and how you would actually deal with that type of problem? Has anyone done that?
In my computing class, especially year 11 and 12, like ICT, I really encourage them to talk to each other and they share all their ideas, so they know at the end of the day what's in their work. But because I've got some boys who are fantastic and other boys that really don't know anything, they know more than I do, so I actually get them to show them how to do things, and that really works for, we call it the whole team environment, that everybody helps everybody, and at the end of the day that increases everybody's market.
Definitely, and especially obviously coming from a development environment, that's actually what we're looking for in our employees. But that's the skills we're actually looking for, is not just the ability to know something really well, but the ability to teach others and also to be able to make the team function as a unit. Are really important skills for our industry. So it's really useful to hear that you're actually teaching those skills in the classroom. So has anyone, I mean, obviously the main issue with sharing work is plagiarism. We have obviously a built-in plagiarism scanner into our system. Does anyone else deal with that sort of issues, and how would you deal with that sort of issue? Thank you. So thanks for the support. So has anyone else used anything like that? Are you using Turnitin or anything like that? Yep. And have you played with the idea of swapping work and doing sort of ad hoc peer review and things like that in the classroom, or? Yep. Is that a fairly common thing, or is it sort of uncommon? I'm getting the feeling it's a bit uncommon. Yep.
Depends on your subject area.
Yep.
I really do. Yeah.
And the year levels probably as well.
Yeah.
Okay.
What subjects would be to that sort of?
Well, I teach computing and also CAD. We do a lot of group work. Like I think the boys are now doing a group project. I always kind of sometimes they get to choose their own groups, or you match them up with somebody that you know is sort of this.
It's funny though, because when I look back at my school, and there's no sort of sharing of that work, that like I struggled with English, and so it would be so beneficial to be able to really engage with more of the students in the class and see the standard of work, see how they were addressing writing back to issues and things like that.
I think it depends on who you are. Because I'm a sharer, like I actually, people like because that's how I learn myself. Like I actually learn by doing and asking and saying. Like I have to ask questions and then get on with it. And then I'll go and I'll go, wow. And I ask again, like I constantly ask them. I won't sit there and go, I do it. I keep asking until I do. And I think that's why I'm okay with it.
Yeah. What about showcasing work? So, for example, after the fact, after it's been submitted, does anyone showcase, put exemplars up for other students to review and see where they could do better? Is that pretty common as well?
Yeah, we've got kids.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yep. So we obviously have, in our system, we build e-portfolios and we allow students to showcase their work on the e-portfolios. So that also opens up that idea of getting feedback after the fact, and also being able to go and look at your peers and see what work they've showcased and have a look at what their standard is. If there's some student that's head of the class, go read what he's doing, find out what makes him the best student. Really useful for other students to learn that. So I've got 10 minutes or so left, so just to wrap up, I thought I'd cover off what's, I guess, in it for teachers. I mean, all of this sounds like a whole lot of more work, and I always get that I don't have time for this, and when am I going to do this? I'm busy in the classroom, and all of those ideas. So I thought I'd just point out some of the ways to work a bit smarter and get work done more efficiently using the digital space. So you're actually getting some benefits in your workflows to improve your learning. So one of the things that I think is really useful is assessing electronically. Sort of the LMS products like ours and other programs in the marketplace have made great sort of leaps and strides in optimizing this workflow. We heard before about the plagiarism scanner built in, so we can now build in a whole lot of processes through that workflow so that you're receiving the work, all knowing who's handed in, what time they handed in. All of that work's done for you. You can see whether it's plagiarized, you can annotate and mark it all online, and then you can press a button and it all immediately goes back to the student, saving yourself a huge amount of time using those electronic tools to actually do the assessment item. In our system, we've also done things like our videos are automatically transcoded when the student submits them, so that you just press play, you watch the video, you've got a rubric next to it, you mark the rubric and press submit, and it's just returned straight to the student. So there's lots of benefits in using online assessment tools rather than all of the traditional pile of paper, going through it, writing on it, translating it into your mark book, then translating it into your reports. There's lots of ways to sort of optimize that process. So have a look into those ideas. Obviously, engaging students outside the classroom is really important. Like you don't necessarily need to use the classroom space to watch videos like we used to do at school. The teacher used to put up a video in the classroom page and spend the time marking assignments in the corner. Today we can obviously engage students outside the classroom, so we can put up material that they watch before they come to class, that idea of flipping the classroom. So leave the time in the classroom for actually working with students, discussing ideas with them, collaborating projects, those sort of things. So getting them to actually do a lot of the actual study and research outside the classroom. Yeah. Mm. Yeah. Yeah, I mean, I brought up the statistics before, and it was sort of about 75 to 80% of students have internet or have an internet accessible device. So it is high, but you're right, there is still a bit margin. Yep. 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 But we're approaching that time when it's probably not going to be so much of an issue. It's becoming rarer and rarer, I imagine, and probably. Yeah, definitely. Definitely.
Yeah, but if you look at the stats, there were companies like Google that were running the
Yeah. Obviously encouraging collaborative learning. So you mentioned before using Edmodo, that idea of having students teach other students online. You can get a lot of benefit, a lot of learning can happen. You don't even have to be involved in that. You just create the space, set it up, and let students actually do their own learning in that online space. Engage students with materials and tools that obviously matter to them. So obviously these days students don't want textbooks, they don't want all of those types of heavy, thick documents that we used to hand out, videos, audio, and act as a curator, just act as a curator rather than a publisher. All you need to do is curate the videos, set them in line, and let the students follow along in that curated process. That about sums it up for me. Just about to run out of time, so thank you very much for all coming today. If you've got any questions, I'm happy to take any further questions, but thanks also for involving yourselves in the discussion. It was really good to hear everyone's comments and feedback as well. That was great. Central, yes, yeah. No, that's fine. I'm from a company called Alaris that develops a learning management system called Schoolbox. So we work with schools all around Australia, basically making a tool that brings all this stuff together into an online space. And teachers use our tool to do all this online learning. Yeah. 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 Excellent.